conversation of, hey, I've got openings. Do you have anybody that's available that may live in my county that I could reach out to, because I'm down, I'm low. Polk County, bless their heart, Polk County Sheriff's Office is 8 peace officers and 15 jailers down right now, and they're starting to have to cut essential services, and that was as of last week. And so, from the street standpoint, I'd echo that the applicants, the training, trying to get some qualified folks out here to interview and give jobs to. It's tough. It's tough. I'm sure there's others that have got things to, that would make the comment or would sound similar. We would all nod our head and go, yeah, I'm having that problem too. Those are some of the things that come to mind, from my standpoint. I hadn't even touched on things to do with the border. I hadn't even touched to the fact that there was a time where we could say in Southeast Texas, we're not affected by what goes on at the border. Those days are gone. And this conversation we had last week in a meeting with some sheriffs, and it came up of, we can no longer say that, because number one, whether it's resources that we've depended on here for years that are now being drugged to the border as part of the governor's plan, or as a plan to try to target and get some enforcement and some relief at the border. As local sheriffs, we're having to give up resources that we normally rely on. Department of Public Safety is one example. Something as simple as a car crash, where a trooper's going to come out and work a car crash that they're waiting an hour, 2, 3, 4. People are waiting for a trooper to come and work a crash. When I need that extra assistance from law enforcement in a rural county, DPS has always been quick to stand up. Troopers have been quick to say, hey, I'm here, I can help you, whatever that call is. Now we're down to 1 or 2 or 3 at any given time in our county, and sometimes none. We share a sergeant area with Tyler County. There's days when they have nobody. They call and they, well, the troopers down in Hardin County, give me back in a while. So grant funding is another. A lot of our funding sources that we were relying on for grant monies at the local law enforcement, which is a godsend for us to be able to get things done, a lot of that money is now earmarked and being redirected in the name of Border Star, in the name of border. And so to say that the border crisis does not affect us is not correct. It does, and it affects us in a spin-off way that it's pulling resources, it's pulling available funding that we once had, redirecting. And I'm not saying that that's not a good use. Obviously they need that, but at some point that vacuum that it leaves behind it, we've got to do something to address that. And so again, that's my 2 cents. But
and Sheriff, to be fair to you, because right after you were elected the first time, there were some things you did implement, like a mental health officer. I want you to talk about that, because you are doing something, you're just not waiting on legislature.
Yeah, both Chambers County, Orange County, Hardin County, we've all jumped on newer, better programs for mental health. And there's a lot of things out there. I've got a mental health deputy full-time, that's what he does, but he also serves the cities too. And I wish I had 5 more just like him. I mean, it's that big of a program. That's helped us restore those officers and deputies' time out on the streets handling law enforcement calls, because they were tied up on a mental health crisis call, and they were dealing with that in the wait time to get into a hospital for an evaluation, for emergency committal. Those things were tough. And so the state, in its infinite wisdom, did provide some funding to the local agencies to pay for that officer and a vehicle and maybe a licensed professional counselor to ride with them. And so that's a really good start, and it's really proven to be beneficial. We just got a lot of legwork yet to go to get more of that done. And again, I wish I had 5 more just like some of the agencies have added a second one, and we're looking at that now to maybe try to add that. That's the buzzword, I mean, that's where everything, the rubber meets the road right now. It's causing, whether it's new requirements from a jail commission standpoint on what we do, intakes coming into the county jail for mental health, or mental health crisis, where we've got folks in the county jail that don't need to be there. Let's be honest. There's a lot of those folks that there's no other option, and up until the most recent past, we had no other option. A city police officer got a call to business for a person panhandling, and they wouldn't leave, and they were in a mental health crisis. They were talking to themselves, seeing things that weren't there. They were trespassing, and they went to jail. But the root of that, and we've all had to re-educate ourselves and learn that there was a root behind that, and the cause was they're suffering from a mental health issue, and it's compelling them to get complained on, get arrested, and if we could go back and address some of those symptoms that person was having, give him or her some help, that would alleviate a lot of those inmates in the county jail, which in turn is going to free up some resources out on the street for other things. And it's a cycle, and I know it is, and we didn't get that way overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. But I would encourage the legislators to continue to look at that funding through HHSC. That's been such a big help to establishing the mental health liaison peace officers in the various areas and counties. To definitely, we want to keep that, and if possible, we'd love to see that funding increase to maybe expand that program even more.
Okay, and hopefully we can get to a position, Sheriff, where we have these resources there. You don't have to wait to go to jail or get in contact with your law enforcement for someone to go get mental health treatment. Okay, and sometimes you can't help it, but in many instances, we're pretty much throwing this off on the law enforcement and the criminal justice folks to kind of start the mental health treatment scenario. Any one of you got anything else to throw out there? Yes, Sheriff.
Chairman, one of the things that I think we need to talk about, and it's really important, is bail reform. All right. And
thank you for going.
And the reason we need to discuss bail reform is because one of the problems that you and I know we've discussed it many times at the Capitol. There's no doubt you were a champion for Southeast Texas, protecting us, really not just for Southeast Texas, but the whole state. Don't let rural Texas or small county Texas become a victim of Harris County, Dallas County, Bexar County. And you have always done that. You've always protected it. And I say that because let's talk about bail reform. So bail reform it's really two formulas. It's the sheriff and it's the justice of the peace.
Okay.
All right. And it's all about communication. And the failures that are happening in Harris County don't happen in Hardin County, Chambers County, Tyler County.
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
They happen in big city Texas that we're not releasing our murderers. It's Harris County that's releasing the murderers. I'm not afraid to have a conversation with the justice of the peace that I have a relationship with and let him know how violent the individual is. And he can look at the criminal history. Now that you've made it, you've opened all that up where the justice of the peace has the ability to understand the criminal history, has the ability to communicate and figure out what's in the best interest of the citizens and protecting the citizens. It's one thing to let somebody out that's been arrested for marijuana, or let somebody out that is a trespassing issue. And so many of our trespassing issues, Sheriff Dave is so right, end up being mental health issues. And they don't need to be stuck in our county jail. But who does is the murderer, the people that are the offenders, the ones that are out committing the violent crimes, that are taking a simple crime like stealing a catalytic converter that is now, you don't find a catalytic converter thief that doesn't have a weapon on him now. Well, that's not any different than the guy that's burglarizing the house. When he's got the weapon on him and he's burglarizing the house, it changes the whole scenario of the offense that he's committed. So,
and if I could, Sheriff, for the folks that are watching, really, we're very attuned to what's going on, and it I'm not going to say the guy's name, but when we were having these discussions in Austin, the guy sat down to testify, Joe, and he said, look, there are more counties in Texas other than Harris and Dallas, okay? And they have large delegations and they come up with ideas. They got a lot of votes on the House floor, proportionally more in the Senate, and they kind of drive a lot of the policy. But probably about 6 or 7 years ago, there was maybe a bipartisan effort, but it was a reasonable effort, as the sheriff talked about, to look at some of the bail practices in some of our counties. And they went with the misdemeanors, one of the famous ones, driving with license invalid, and it's a mama with 3 kids in the car, and do you want her in the jail? over the weekend and the kids are now in CPS. Well, can we just come up with a process to get her out and give her a court date? And everybody was sort of okay with that. We can work with that. But then, some of these activists just jumped from misdemeanors, like low-level misdemeanors, and they went to turnstiling some real bad dudes. And when I say turnstile, it's just like the old times at the grocery store when you had a turnstile. I mean, they were picked up, agent, for shooting somebody in the middle of the street, and somewhere like in Harris County, they get a $100 PR bond, which is pretty much like a classroom slip you used to get back in high school to just leave class, okay? And they'll get a slip to just leave, and they'll go out and mug somebody, and you'll look at these rap sheets, and it is dozens of these situations. So we had to come, Harris County, they're folks, and understand the leadership of the state. The lieutenant governor, the governor, they're both good guys, but they're from Harris County, right? And so we've got to do something about this because we have these judges back in these counties. They're not looking at the records, okay? They're just turnstiling people out. So we get bail reform. Now, like most things in the legislature, it starts out like a pretty good idea until the bills start getting filed, and then they started getting laid out, and we were seeing where they were going to put some cost on the counties, especially small counties. So we had to slow down some of that. But the sheriff is right. It's the sheriff, the deputy that's booking in that individual, that suspect, and we've got to do a real good job. I think out in my area, mostly the JPs do the magistration, okay, mostly, in like in Tyler County. We've got to impress upon, these are some very important positions that people are running for. JP, district judge, and you need to, when y'all go to these elections in 2 weeks, you need to ask the question, is your judge a rule of law, law and order judge? You got to ask those questions. And so, I don't know, any other commentary about that, about the philosophy behind bail? You want to add something in on that?
Well,
I mean, you've been game warden, you booked them in, probably booked them out, I don't know.
right. The what Sheriff Hawthorne said, having that criminal history, that gives the JP to look and see what this individual's done in the past, and you can, if you read it, you can determine whether or not this guy poses a violent threat to the public. A lot of times in court, unless it's just really exigent circumstances, you can't bring up a defendant's past.
Okay.
But this is one step in the criminal justice system where you can look at his past, and that will help you determine the bail.
On this issue, because I would talk judges, law enforcement from Harris County to Hardin County, okay, and I'm just like, I think my law enforcement, they've got some piece of paper when they're booking a guy in that has all of that, and some of these places, I don't know what was going on, but they judges just didn't have the information yet. So do for the folks that are looking at this, when I book somebody in, and if I'm one of your deputies, Brad, when I book someone in, does that judge have a list of all the convictions or arrests?
Yeah, now that criminal history is provided, and kind of like we're hitting on now, they're emphasizing that.
Okay.
That they look at, and that's kind of their guideline now,
Okay.
if you will.
Okay.
So many times we've seen in the past where it was basically back when I started in 2013, it was kind of the recommendation of the district judge to have numbers that were placed on certain bonds. And they've gotten away from that.
Okay.
The JPs now, but they're, again, this is going to be a guideline for them and really a guidance. But at the same time, Sheriff Hawthorne hit on it perfect. We don't deal with the same issues in Tyler County as they do in Harris County. and Bear County, those bigger counties. So it's, in a lot of ways, we're seeing some punishment and some things that we can't necessarily, the JPs are going to, but it's a learning curve for them as well. So, you know, I mean, will it ultimately protect the citizens of Texas? Of course, but it's going to take a lot of work, and we've got to make sure, just as the sheriff said, that we don't get to where we're being punished for what's happening in Harris County and Bear County and things like that.
So Chairman, there is no doubt in my mind, I don't even have to ask these two, there's no doubt in my mind, both of them, their jail is as full as mine.
Yes.
Okay.
And I know Sheriff Davis is, because he used to keep some of my prisoners and he refuses to keep them anymore. Okay? All right? So I'm in a bind because most of the sheriffs that would house my prisoners, like Mark, that can't anymore because they're full, they're all kicking my prisoners back. Now I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. And I think what's important for the legislature to know is the sheriff and the justice of the peace are smart enough to communicate with each other to figure out how to set bonds to keep the ones that are dangerous in the jail and the ones that are not dangerous out of the jail. And then we can use other things like ankle monitoring and all kinds of other things. So there's a way to fix it.
And I would tell you this, just as a lay person, I'll open up the Tyler County Booster, I go to the Newton County News, and you know, someone has shot someone, I look at it, that JP has a minimum of $500,000 bond.
Yes.
Now, the district judge will come in, that he or she has some assessments that they do. Maybe it goes to 250, maybe it goes to 100, maybe it goes up higher, okay? But I'm watching on those violent ones, and I just go to the newspaper, and those JPs, you know, they're just on pretrial detainment. You know, we've got to keep you in until we can figure stuff out. We get the district judge and the DA, you know, and that person's attorney before. So you're right, I understand. We don't need to. Tarrant County doesn't need to dictate to Tyler County. Harris County doesn't need to dictate to Hardin County. Okay, and we need to continue watching it.
So qualified immunity, let's talk about that real quick.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
Because that qualified immunity affects every person that's
And
sitting
could
at this
you,
table.
for the folks, explain why that's important?
Well, here's one thing for sure with qualified immunity is that and I'll use the simple scenario where we get in a gun battle, all right? And sad to say, sheriff's deputies and police officers across the nation are getting in more gun battles than we ever had. And it's because the criminals, they don't care, all right? They don't care. So we get in this gun battle, and let's just say hypothetically, we accidentally injure somebody. And I use the term truly accidental, whether it's a round that goes over the suspect's shoulder and maybe goes through a wall and then hurts and injures somebody else. Qualified immunity is something that if we were in the performance of our duty, we were trained to do it.
Mm-hmm.
We had no intent on hurting somebody. We were focused on what we were going to do, but something happened outside of it.
And that qualifies
us for immunity.
Right,
okay?
right.
On the other hand, if the police officer was improperly trained,
Mm-hmm.
he was being reckless, and the court has the ability to let us out of qualified immunity and sue that officer or sue the sheriff or the police chief or the city or the county. All right. Well, most of us sheriffs are very responsible. Most of these police chiefs sitting here are very responsible. Qualified immunity it's being attacked in the social justice world, and all it's going to do is cost the taxpayers millions and millions and millions
And
of
let me
dollars.
tell you what it's also going to do. Going back to recruitment.
Yes, sir.
I mean, if I'm just going to sign up, look, if I want to be a law enforcement officer, that's something I want to do. I believe I've been called to do it. I'm not going to get extremely wealthy probably doing it. Maybe have a decent lifestyle, but it's not getting being Elon Musk or anything, right? But if I know I'm going to get into something like that, like this, like law enforcement, and you know, the way I give someone a ticket to maybe a gun battle, and I'm gonna get sued. I mean, who the heck is going to do that? Who want to do that?
then the officers you have working, who's gonna wanna get out there and
Yes.
make that stop, or go in that building looking for that guy, or something like that?
So Danny, a lot of times when they say qualify, we don't want Harris County policy dictating Hardin County, we don't want Tarrant County driving Collin County driving Chambers County. A lot of times I found out these issues come up from Minnesota. Okay, so something egregious happens in Minnesota. You know what I'm talking about, okay? And then it's high profile, it gets all over the news, and now, we got to come up with something here in Texas to make sure that doesn't happen, even though it never happened here in Minnesota. And so, Sheriff Hawthorne, he's the Sheriff's Association legislative director, but when he's really at Austin, he's really for all law enforcement. Okay, concentrating on the sheriff, but he's for all law enforcement. And we have to tell a lot of folks in the legislature, look, there's some things we want to work with you on. I think the law enforcement wants to work with you on because they want better training. They want trained folks on the streets. They want the best, like you said, the best applicants. But as I told one of my favorite legislators that was carrying one of these big old bills on police reform, I said, qualified immunity, that's just got to be a non-starter. Okay, it's just has to be a non-starter. And some people were upset about that. But again, you can't have people 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning making a stop, and they're also worrying about, am I going to get sued? And when you get sued, it's just not you, it's your wife, your house, your kid, all of that. So, and then that goes back to the defund the police scenario. And, you and I have talked about this a lot, and you in the civic work that you do, Joe. As a citizen, how does this defund the police?
Well, defund the police is probably the most ignorant thing I've heard of in 72 years. Okay?
You've been that long?
Well,
Okay.
this month makes 72 years. But I'd much rather have somebody, when you talk about sheriff, I'd rather have a guy that wrote a hot check walking in front of my house at night than the guy that just let out for murder. We got to make sure who we keep in jail. And like you say, we have to make sure our police officers across the board are protected. If they're in the line of duty, they're in the line of duty. And it ain't no piece of cake out there. It's a life, and y'all make a decision in a split second what you're gonna do. And a young man, 18, 17, 15 years old, pulls a gun. How in the world are you supposed to know it's plastic? You gonna wait till see the fire come out of the tank? Y'all got the worst job that possibly be out here. Okay, and people say they don't want to. The only reason we can walk and be where we are today is because most people know there's law enforcement roaming around out there. You just take a week off and said there'd be no law enforcement anywhere in the United States. You think it was bad at Katrina when everybody left and the looting was going and the shooting there? That was a picnic. There ain't nobody gonna get out of your house. You have to stay there and protect what you got. It is a thin blue line, what we've got. But let me tell you something. I don't know how big this room is, and I don't know nothing about jails. I was in one time. That's smart not the judge. Okay. When I've done something really wrong. It's just I was aggravated at what he was telling me, and I figured I'd get well, I'll learn real quick, don't do that. But anyway, holding cell. But I come from a large family. And me and my brothers lived in a room from about right here over, and that was it. And all of us made it through that. It's a shame. I don't know how many people you can put in a cell. How many go in a foxhole to defend this country? And now all these prisoners got rights. When you rape a child, when you kill that grandmother, when you beat your wife unmercifully 10 or 15 times, you don't have any rights in my book. Okay? I wish I was up there and could do something about it, because all of you, I'd take the handcuffs off of you and let you go out there and do what you need to do. Now, a lot of people wouldn't like that. They think that was too harsh. But y'all see some things that the common folk never see. Y'all got things that y'all go out there and you witness when, like the little baby up here that got thrown against the trailer and died. And the lady that picked him up, she still ain't right. drove down, she's still not right. Y'all see this every day, and we just hear about it. I know he's seen some bad stuff in his time with FBI. Y'all see some horrible stuff, and I wish to God we could flash that to some of these bleeding hearts out there that think you're doing a bad job, because you're not. You're doing a great job, and thank you every day for what you do, because if it wasn't for you, I couldn't drive down the road. My wife couldn't go to the shopping mall. It's a little hairy out there now, but you know, what would it be? One of my employees was pulling in the Parkdale Mall, and his girlfriend said, there's a gun laying there. Really? So he stops and he picks it up. He turns it into the Beaumont Police Department, and it was a murder weapon. They trace it back. The guy bought it legally. Okay, that's fine. He admits it. Him and his buddy got to drinking, doing some other things, got to arguing. So he shot him. Didn't stay to render no help. Guy lived a couple hours. The autopsy said laying in the ditch. Well, they finally had that trial. That guy got 60 days in jail and 10 years probation. I know a guy personally that sold 2 cars out of trust, got 33 months in the federal penitentiary. Do you tell me how that tastes right on either side? I'm not saying what the guy done selling the cars was wrong or right. That he shouldn't have done it. But a guy shot his friend, admits it, and he gets 90 days and 10 years probation. You know, we need to quit slapping the hand and slap something harder than that. I wish I could take the bridle off just for a little while. You know, if we could get back to where an eye for an eye. And when the crime exceeds the punishment the way it's going right now, that's crazy. The punishment needs to exceed the crime. You kill somebody, you pay with your life. You know, I was raised the old school. I might be the oldest guy in the room, I don't know. But I can tell you something. It was called respect back in my day. You respect your family, and you respect your law enforcement, you respect your leaders in school. You got into trouble in school, you got real trouble when you got home. We don't do that no more. We don't do that. We done wandered off into this deal where kids 8 or 10 years old can make the decisions of what they want to be and who they want to be. Hell, they still don't know what's going to ask Santa for.
Well, it wouldn't
You know,
happen
we just went crazy. Our politicians have went crazy. Pardon now, but our politicians have went crazy.
Oh, there's a few of us here.
I mean, Jesus.
You know,
I mean, really, truly think about that.
Yeah, we're thinking about that, and so I know, you know, we had a hearing last couple of days ago, maybe 3 days ago. Tuesday, and again, law enforcement association after law enforcement association, law enforcement officer after law enforcement officer. You know, having good people that you can bring into your department, train them up, and get them out there. It seems like that's getting tougher by the day.
We're fortunate in our area
Yes.
because our community supports us. And I'm sure in Chambers County and Tyler County, the community, but what these folks with the 100 Club do, Zach, Scott, Joe, you know, if something happens, they're gonna make sure our families are taken care of.
Okay.
But when you go to Austin,
Well, we want to make sure we don't get there. So, you know, I know some of our high schools have some programs, you know, vocation like. What are some other things? You know, you're retired, okay? And maybe you can tell us how you got into law enforcement. You know, what motivated you to get in law enforcement, but what are those motivators? How do we, you know, I think that respect, starting at school, you know, respecting your coaches, respecting your teachers, respecting the law enforcement in your community, just respecting your parents probably, right? But what are some of those motivators? And what are some of the enhancements that we need to make sure that we get more young men and women into this career path?
well, and I'm not taking credit for this, but
Okay.
game wardens have always kind of operated under a community-oriented policing deal. I know the sheriff in Hardin County tries to utilize that, Shawn, y'all may over in Silsbee, but we try to get involved with the kids when they're in school and all that, and you try to be a role model. You try to be someone that those kids look up to, someone they can talk to. but in my opinion, the police, whether it's police, sheriff, game warden, you can make an impact on someone's life just by taking the time to talk to them or whatever, but there is nothing more important, in my opinion, than community-oriented policing.
Okay. Okay.
So Chairman, one of the things that I think if you listen to what Rod Ousley was saying, is local control, all right? So
Okay.
one of the things he was talking about is how they don't have a problem here. I don't have a problem in mine. I got plenty of support. There's no doubt in my mind that Ryan and Arron and Shawn, all of our communities, Danny's, are very much law enforcement supporters. The problem that I see is Austin, where you and I got to turn over here and turn to Representative Bales.
He's here.
All right, and the reason that's important to me is because Representative Bales, some of these gentlemen don't necessarily know this, but there's probably not a bigger fighter for law enforcement and local control than Representative Bales. And I tell you that because I've worked with him, he and I talk regularly, and he is constantly supporting county judges and commissioners court, trying to keep it at what we call local control. City councils and commissioners court need to be running our communities, not state representatives, all right?
And state
We-
senators.
And state senators.
Don't keep them
We need state representatives and state senators setting the parameters, but not running government. And where that's important to me, and this is where you've been such a help to us, Chairman, is the state of Texas has all but tried to create a state internal affairs because of social justice issues. And you killed it, you helped us kill it. And I just want you to know, I think it's important for all of us. We'll tell you plain and simple, keep local control as local control. We need city councils and commissioners court helping govern what we do, not rules, regulations, and policies coming from Austin, Texas.
And the idea is that we got local elected DAs
That's right.
that investigate,
Yes. Very much so.
shootings.
There's a
and
reason
people-
why we have a locally elected
DA.
DA.
Right.
There's a reason why we have a locally elected
Judge.
people's representative, whether it be a commissioner's court member, a city council member, a school board member. There's a
JP.
reason why there is on a local level. And the more that we can do to fight that aggressive nature of coming in and removing that power, removing the local influence over our day-to-day general operations, okay? Those protocols that are set on how we do thus and such. There was a hard battle last time in the last legislative session. Thanks to your wisdom,
And you were up.
and others that saw through that smoke and mirrors and said, hang on a minute, there's a reason why there's local control in our lives, and we want to keep that. And we don't want to delegate that to somebody who doesn't know what our values are in, I'll just say, Southeast Texas.
Or even
Okay?
know the resources we have. Okay.
I'm
what
gonna jump in here.
Yeah,
I mean, we have to spend more time killing legislation than actually passing legislation.
That's exactly right.
It's
And
because
that's
the
a sign of
negative,
our times, and it's unfortunate, but that is very true.
it's the negative unintended consequence of a one size fits all. One thing you guys have is discretion. I mean, it's no different from a game warden to, I mean, sheriff or anything else. I mean, you know the background, you know the story, and sometimes you need to be able to reach that kid with some tough love, be able to get them on the straight and narrow without ruining their life from then on. And that's one thing that legislatively we'll never do right. You guys have the opportunity to do that here.
And one thing I think my first session I did one session. I don't know. Have you ever did a term on county affairs? Okay, I once served on county affairs. I would think about 2/3 of the bills. We would hear about 60, 70, 80 bills a night, and 2/3 of the bills were probably Harris, Dallas, Marion County. And what I learned, Sheriff, is when people can't control locally, they come to Austin to try to control locally.
Yes.
Okay, so they can't win at the school board level, they can't win at the city council level, they can't win at the county commissioners court level. So they come to Austin, and what's crazy about it, you'll have You have two elected officials from the same county or city in a committee hearing arguing
Yes.
Yes.
in Austin. And I'm like, man, y'all could just go home and do this
Yeah.
and figure that out. Y'all don't have to come up here, and then we can go focus on the things focus on. Real quick, as we're sort of winding down, but my colleague here, Ernest, is with us for 2 sessions, I believe, 2 or 3 sessions. We've served together on the corrections committee. We don't want to forget our men and women in gray. They are law enforcement, and fortunately, many of them were on that list that I read Sunday at the Peace
Yes.
Officers Memorial. So you want to talk about some of the issues with the corrections officers and how we've helped them really recently.
Well, and it's no different. I mean, our teachers, any law enforcement, first responders, we don't typically support them. And the problem is, how do we expect someone to give their all if we don't even support them? And then how do we expect to recruit good people? And I get myself in trouble a lot when we have the hearings, because the only thing we hear is how we should better enforce offenders' rights, not the victims' rights, not how they got there. Essentially, they did something to put them in that situation. And that's one thing that we completely lose sight of, and it's there needs to be a negative consequence. You break the rules, there has to be a negative consequence, and that's one thing that's always important on supporting you guys and letting us know. I mean, we've conversation with some of our local electeds here today. Anytime that we have an issue, I reach out to the broader associations. Like if I have one sheriff that has an issue or one constable that has an issue, I try to reach out to some of the other constables in the other counties before we try to do a one-size-fits-all, and just make sure that this is something we need to do. Because the absolute worst thing that I can do is work hard to draft a piece of legislation and find out that, well, I mean, I've got 4 sheriffs and 3 of the sheriffs are against it. Well, maybe that.
It's gonna help 3, but it's gonna hurt 20.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
that's a problem.
Exactly.
And that's we have to bracket a lot of things, because there's Harris County and a lot of our major metropolitan areas, they have issues different than we have. So a lot of times we have to actually introduce amendments that bracket that based on population. Hardin County is not at all like Harris County, nor should it ever be. We don't have the same problems, and we don't need to take the same approach. So I mean, and that's one. It's I mean, boots on the ground. You see what's happening. You know what's happening. And that's where, if you guys have something, don't ever hesitate to come to me, whether I'm your rep or not. It's we don't have enough rural representatives to pass anything. We will never again have a rural state senator. After the last redistricting, our state senators represent more than a U.S. congressman.
Yeah.
And it takes relationships and bridging that gap. I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, as far as infrastructure challenges, I mean, not having a big force, we've got more in common with a lot of our Democratic colleagues down in South Texas or West Texas. You have to work together and identify, I mean, put your politics aside and know what's best. And that's one thing that has always been very successful doing here's the issue. Is it a valid issue? Is it something we already have on the books? We want to pass a lot of laws, they're already on the books. Typically, it's not just a new idea that just popped out of the sky. We already have it. And if we're not enforcing that one, do we need to go back and enforce that, or do we need to put the mechanisms in place to support you guys to enforce that? So with that, I mean, it's I'm there. I'm a rural guy. It's I appreciate wholeheartedly what you guys do, and we'll always support you guys. So if there's something that I need to do, don't hesitate to let me know. I mean, we lost a huge asset with Chairman White, but we still have rural guys that are there and who are willing to listen. And I say that, and I mean that wholeheartedly, whether I'm your rep or not. It takes 76 votes to pass anything out of the House. It doesn't matter where those 76 come from. 76 like-minded who understand what you're trying to do, that's all we need.
And just as we're sitting here chatting, here it is, just in on the news. 2 Dallas PD cops were indicted today in connection to the use of force during the George Floyd protest in Dallas. So, you know, remember 2 years ago, you had all this going on. I was looking at video footage from the Capitol. There were people swinging sledgehammers. I mean, people were throwing big rocks at law enforcement, and somehow out of all of that was going on in Dallas, 2 are indicted. Okay, and that's tough. Before we end, I know we have a special ranger. Okay, and we got a couple of police chiefs and FBI agent, a constable. We want to get from you guys some if there's some unique challenges in your perspective in your offices. We want to listen to those.
Pretty much covered everything for me,
Okay.
on the police side.
Okay. Is DPS at least driving around a little bit more?
Well, since we
Okay.
talked in September, no.
They're not okay.
No,
We'll call
we're still-
we'll call them again and tell them to come sit down there a while and slow them down. That's 105, right? 2 4 lanes are really wide, and that your foot
Well, like
just
you touched
leans
on earlier,
on.
there's 3 for this county, and I think 3 for the other county, and them going to borders, and they're not available. You got one having to come out of Jasper to work a wreck on 421 when you got Beaumont.
Yeah.
That's the guy sitting on 105, they can't go.
Okay, we'll lean on them a little
You know,
bit more.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
and to add to that, I thought of this earlier. The citizens are aware of that. You're not your law abiding. Well,
I hear
both
about
you're
it.
law abiding, but they know where all the troopers are at. So it does it, and we are seeing. I know Hardin County the same way. We're seeing our accidents. We're seeing
Drive a
that
little
number.
fast, a little
Yes.
reckless.
Yes, we're seeing
Okay.
that. But also, I want to touch. Just you were talking about the Dallas officers, and a couple of years ago, I never saw the support of my community, my county ever waver as far as law enforcement. I think we as a group worry about the fact of these federal mandates coming down to the state level laws, and then it being put on us again, that punishment, if you will. I mean, so I think we worry more about not being supported at the state level, and even at our county levels to some extent, more so than we do with our citizens. We, I look back on that as we were talking, our citizens stayed strong with us, and we were really proud of that.
That's something we do enjoy. And-
Yes,
and
we do.
Scotty's
We do. We are blessed with that. Last thing I'll leave that I wanted to hit on is, as far as the citizens are concerned, we got some upcoming elections very soon. You'll see some great candidates. Something, as a former justice of the peace, we were talking about the bail reform and things that you come up with. Experience matters, and we've got to make sure that these voters realize that the experience is crucial. A lot of times in rural East Texas and all over the nation, we get into a popularity contest. We've got to look at and know that experience matters, because we don't, in this day and age, whether the judicial side, the law enforcement side, when you come in, a candidate taking office has got to be able to come in and hit the ground running these days. We don't have time to learn how the court system works and how, it's just, I can't emphasize that enough, that experience matters, and I thank our citizens for doing that.
Yeah, and Sheriff, you've always been in law enforcement. You kind of went from law enforcement into sort of like judicial branch. Experience matters, but just those life experiences, right?
Exactly.
And voting would be good.
Voting would be good.
That's
Life
crucial.
experiences, but in your capacity as law enforcement, you've met a lot of people where they are.
Yes.
Okay, and you're more than probably what a school teacher would meet, or a lawyer would meet. You meet people where they are. You got a little intuitiveness about you when you look at something. I've heard some judges on the bench, JP's trying to do arraignment, and they'll just say, "Hey, I just didn't something about that. I just didn't feel about that guy."
Yeah.
And I just need to hold him here for a while. Maybe tomorrow it changes. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's those type of things I think that matters also. Constables, y'all got a great lobby team up there, the constables in Austin. And anything that we need to be conscious about your scenario?
Nothing in particular here with us right now that I can think of, but, on the JPs, I got a call earlier this week from one of our JPs so that I can pass on a message about someone he had arraigned and the attitude he had. He had a protective order placed on him, and he said, hey, I just wanted y'all to be aware that he's probably gonna go violate that protective order. So that relationship with our JPs and them making those phone calls, it's something as simple as just, hey, here's a heads up.
Okay.
And we certainly appreciate that, from the judges.
Okay. And knowing that there's someone that you can have that relationship with,
Right.
okay, as law enforcement. Yes, sir.
I am the oldest in the group.
You got him beat.
No way.
And he looks it.
Take your hat off. No, I would, a couple of things. I think if people would all over the country be doing what's being done today here, and I appreciate you for doing this, we'd be better off. Having seen in the 70s and 80s, working in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I've seen a lot. But when I arrived here, I've never in my life around this country seen a better working relationship that the locals, the county, the state, and the feds had. We worked together. My badge wasn't as big as the others, and theirs wasn't as big as mine. And we just went out and worked. But, Danny made a good point. What law enforcement has become today is become reactive versus proactive. And why? I mean, why go out there and put yourself in jeopardy? Because only about 3 or 4 things are going to happen. You're going to get indicted, you're going to get killed, you're going to kill him, and go to jail.
It's not our nature to be reactive.
It's not. You're always proactive. That's the only way you make big cases. But I am disappointed in my agency. The agents are still the same, but the hierarchy is terrible. And we just need more politicians like you.
Don't just say that.
Well, I know, to realize the problem we have out
Right.
there. Because these men every day go out there and do a job and put their life in jeopardy. And
you're right. I know that FBI has taken a lot of hits, but that's not the agent.
that's not the agent.
Down on the ground. It's it's kind of like in some other systems, you get way up and you become more of a politician than a public servant. And we know they're still down there.
Well, you had Louis Free in the 90s bringing the first non-FBI person to run a section of the FBI, Justice Department people. And then Mueller and then Comey just flooded the gates with it.
Yeah.
And once you do that, you politicize the FBI.
Right. I remember a
That's what's
time
happening.
when the FBI, most of those guys were former Marines.
Hoorah.
On the agent level, yeah, they were former Marines, straight and narrow, and but we know the folks that are doing the work are still the good guys and gals.
There you go.
My friend here, with the 100 Club, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say dittos to all of you on what you're saying. I mean, we are so appreciative of what you do every day, putting your lives on the lines. And as Mr. Penland said, it's just a catastrophe the way that the public's not backing law enforcement the way that they should be, the way we are around here. It's just pitiful what the country has come to here lately with so many more liberal views and aspects to it, and everybody needs to rein in and go back kind of like we were to give y'all the leniency to run your organizations the way you need to, I think.
I'm not gonna run down that road. You ain't gonna have to come get me.
No, I've been here, I've done it for 30 years as a game warden now with the Cattle Association. I strived on youth-oriented events throughout my career. This is where we're losing it. We're losing a lot of the youth to the outdoors. We're losing a lot of youth to respect for their elders or law enforcement, and it starts at home. And we've got to get back on track. to regain this respect. But, you know, where do we start? Because it starts in the home front. You know, law enforcement now, they hit the streets every day. We've got support through a lot of the community, like the 100 Club. These guys shouldn't have to go out and make split decisions. And when they're making these split decisions, they're hesitating. They're thinking across their head right now. Lawsuits, penitentiary, they shouldn't have to do that. But it's sad that we are. And you know, we're gonna have to just move forward to adjust to this society, because it's changed, and it's gonna keep on changing. You know, we've gotta still continue to get quality applicants to the sheriff's department, highway patrol, game wardens, whatever it is. And we're just gonna have to move forward, because it's here, whether you like it or not. Society has changed so much over the last 20 years, you know, but for people like us, our representatives, everybody else that has our back, we need to continue to have our back.
I want to hit on one thing. First of all, I apologize about being a little late. I had opportunities to go other side of Katy. Pretty good hike other side of Katy to Coops, Texas. But the Texas High School Welding Association, and it's kind of deal trying to support those guys, because that's a group of kids that is typically not involved in FFA, like the banquet I was at last night, or not really heavily involved in sports. They're typically a lot of underserved kids that would slip through the cracks. And this was a huge fundraiser. They had a lot of industry that actually came in. Last year alone, they had 1,140 certifications. I mean, helping these kids to be positive, productive citizens. I would much rather have them see a positive light at the tunnel rather than the negative side, and that makes it easier on all of us here.
Exactly right.
Chairman, are you aware of the 19 indictments in Austin? I know you are.
Yeah.
So I
Same scenario, a riot, you know, yeah.
Yes, similar scenario, and some of the people at this table may not realize the majority of those 19 police officers, Austin police officers, that are indicted because their agency, because the police chief, or it could be the sheriff or the constable, but in this case it's the police chief, gave them beanbag ammunition that was expired. So goes right back to the qualified immunity. They shouldn't even be indicted. If they're going to go after anybody, they should be going after the sheriff or the chief of police. But when you're going after a police officer because the ammunition that he was issued to try and go control the riot was ammunition that was expired, because I got a strange feeling, if you go look at my beanbag rounds, they're probably expired right now. And if there was a riot in my community, guess what I'm going to issue? Because it's what I've got, because you can't hardly buy the ammunition right now anyway. So there's a real perverse problem when we've got DAs, I call them rogue DAs, that are going after law enforcement. So Chief Sullins is right. It's hard to encourage people to want to go to work in the law enforcement setting when you have those kind of worries on your shoulder that you have to worry about. And I'll get off my soapbox.
No, you got that. And before we come to you, Danny, and you can start this too, as we start to close. I ask this question everywhere I go around the state, because whether it's supply chains, most of the time folks are focusing on business and the grocery stores, and they very well should. But you know, what are y'all seeing out there as far as, you know, you were supposed to get a vehicle in yesterday, but it's sitting on the dock because it's waiting on the chip, and that was for 2021. You know, now you're going into 2023. You know, what are you seeing out there? Because we do an interim report at the end of the interim, and it's kind of give the legislature a starting point on what they need to be, what to try to be focused on, not on some of these local issues, but how can we help you get the stuff that you can't get now because of Putin or you know, something else around the world. But yes, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to talk about just real quick is the three folks that are in this room, that Mr. Penland, you know, Zach and Scott, that are on the 100 Club board. And we need to be encouraging our officers to join the 100 Club. We really do. We need to.
And their friends,
and
their
friends,
family,
that's right.
and
The
other
100 Club,
community leaders.
they do so much. They do so much. Once a month, that they have a meeting at the Rocket A, and Mr. Penland is our president of the 100 Club. I'm not saying it's because he's in the room, but that board there's not a more important nonprofit in Southeast Texas than the 100 Club of Southeast Texas. I'm telling you that we're blessed to have them. I've seen them in action when the fire chief over in Silsbee, got tragically killed, and seen them in action whenever officers get hurt. Mr. Penland has started up, they've spearheaded the survivor fund. And that's where if one of our guys or firefighter or EMS, city paid EMS gets hurt in the line of duty, then Mr. Penland said they shouldn't have to let their bass boat or buggy go back because they can't work a side job to pay for that. So it's really important that I bought both my boys a lifetime membership for 100 Club. They're both police officers, and I bought them both a lifetime membership when Patrick graduated police academy. And it's the most important organization in our area, in my opinion, from what I stand.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Scott does a great job for me and Zach. He's been president several times. I'm the current president now. And there's not a week go by that I don't write a letter to a police chief or a sheriff somewhere in the state of Texas or a fire chief that they lost one. And we write those people a letter and tell them we're thinking about them. If we hurt them, we know what you're going through. Me and Zach have went to a lot of funerals across the state. 2 firefighters got killed, and we flew to that funeral. And it was a guy, we talk about the mental illness. This guy shot these 2 firefighters, a firefighter and a friend, 47 times. And then the next day, they didn't know who had done it. The next day, he told his family, it's hard to kill an alien. These aliens coming in from these planets, you have to shoot them a lot of times. This guy, obviously this guy was a mental case that needed some help. But 2 young guys got shot that many times. And we went to that funeral, and that's probably the saddest funeral that we've ever been to. We look, and then you talk about the memorials in Beaumont when they walk up there and they put the wreath up there and so forth. Jesus Christ, chances are I might get in a wreck, and I might get in a lot of things. I might get in a fight from my mouth a lot of times, but probably nobody's going to shoot at me. The odds are. I'm not going to rush into a house because it's on fire. But our first responders, what y'all do, it's not for the paycheck. If you didn't have that heart to do what you do and have to make those split decisions, like our chief said right here, the sheriff said, you got to have this bail reform. You can't have this on your back that when you make a life decision in a split second, that now you're going to be sued. Give us a break. Who would want your job? The people
It's unlike any other profession out there.
Yeah.
Law enforcement is unlike any other profession.
Absolutely.
When it comes to being able to selfishly give of yourself, knowing that every day when you go to work, it could be your last day. And I have the utmost respect for all careers and all jobs in this great nation. But there's just no comparison to what we've come to terms with that may be asked of us on any given day. And then to turn around and to bite the very hand that feeds you, pardon the expression, but to pull that rug out from under our feet, to say that qualified immunity when your heart is pure, your intent is sincere, there's no malice, to lose that ability in the stroke of a pen, in the vote of a committee, in the vote on the House and the floor, to lose that protection, I think it sends such a strong message that it will forever alter who we're able to attract, and even more, who we can retain in this line of work. I'm going to tell you, there's several in this room that's probably going to give it a strong second thought.
Yeah.
As to, it may be sooner or later for us to retire. If that's what we're looking at. If we're looking at losing that protection, again, for those with a pure heart, their intentions are genuine. We're not talking about removing accountability from a bad apple. That's not what this is about. we've got to be steadfast in our representatives and our senators, in our mouthpieces, whether it be on the state level or the federal level. We've got to continue to push that. Amongst the other slate of things that the challenges for us, we've got to continue to push that in phone calls, in letters, in testimony, every day.
I've had some walk in my office in Austin. They come to the Capitol, probably testify, law enforcement and law enforcement leaders, and some of them told me that they were going to be transitioning out because even though they knew it wasn't going to pass, we know on most days, most stuff that gets filed passes one day.
Yes.
It may not pass this session or the next session, but it will pass. And so that is already happening. But I'm gonna tell you one way we can fight that is we're gonna degrade the qualified immunity of law enforcement. We need to come up with some type of some way to hold elected officials accountable, and every time they make a bad vote, they can get sued. Okay.
So it starts at the ballot box.
Yeah, right.
We've
Right.
got to get qualified people.
In all positions.
In all positions. We've got to get those elected with like minds, and we're letting the tail wag the dog with this progressive thought process and platform that we're seeing shoved down our throats every day. And that's scary, James.
And we need to ask, I know I do this. I know when you look at the Sheriff's Association, whatnot, whether you're running for state rep, state senator, any of this stuff is, how do you intend, in your position, how do you intend to support law enforcement?
Right.
And that's in any position. When
Yes.
you're something as local as constable, sometimes you gotta ask some of these law enforcement officers, are they supporting law enforcement? You'd be surprised some of the folks coming to my office and what they're thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
But we get asked that question, and there are surveys and questionnaires that we fill out a lot. But I know back home, I get stopped in the restaurant, and people ask me, well, we want to know why all these criminals get out. Well, have you talked to your JP? Have you talked to your district judge? Have you talked to your DA? All of those people are elected, and they get elected every 2 to 4 years.
Well, and you guys have a pretty good thumb on what's going on that affects you guys. The associations are really strong, and I'm gonna hit something that's not exactly related, but the ability for you guys to be part of those associations,
Yes.
and for your counties and in your capacity, you need that.
And that's under attack.
Oh,
It was
100%.
under attack last session, and it's coming right back again.
It's a long way from here to Austin, Texas. And that's the deal. I mean, there's so many things that change on a daily basis. If you guys hear something, call. If I've already heard it, still doesn't matter. I still want to hear from you because you might have a very different take on it. I mean, I'd rather hear from 10 of you guys than not hear from a single one, then get hollered and cussed at when I did it this way. I mean, I really try to do good to ask.
Yeah, our ability to lobby, be it from a sheriff's standpoint, a city council standpoint, our ability to lobby is under attack. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. They're coming for that ability to try for us to influence the senators and the reps, to try to explain to them the passion of what we're feeling, what the voters are feeling in our local areas, and that ability to have our voice heard by you all is under attack, and we're watching that too. Again, it's just one of the many things that we're dealing with.
And that's asinine, because that's, last I heard, that's the job that I'm supposed to do, is to represent you guys, and I can't represent you if I don't know what you have.
That's kind of our point.
And from a lobby standpoint, lobby are resources. There's someone that I can reach out to ask for clarification, understanding on something. I mean, I represent you guys. That's what matters. I mean, lobby is there as a resource. You guys tell me what's important and what we need to do. And that's what a lot of people, they lose sight of that, but that's just as simple as it gets.
And I want to let you know that Sheriff Hawthorne did just a fantastic job. For him, we shouldn't be doing unfunded mandates anyway, okay? But as an elected local official in a rural county, for him to be on that panel every week saying, hey, slow down on this. Now, there was one bill out there. We worked with this guy on it. but Sheriff and I and his team, we went out and we sat down and we talked about it. He would just give me a frank assessment. Rep, that's a crazy bill. Okay, it was a crazy bill at first. Now, we went ahead and worked with the guy because something happened in his district and we wanted to be sensitive to that, okay? But we can't have a situation where we're undermining all law enforcement's ability to respond.
And it goes back to, we can't help 3 and hurt 20.
Right.
And we've got to be mindful, you and the chairman of these committees have got to be mindful that there's more than just one side to a social issue. And you've really got to spend the time hearing from witnesses in committee and educating yourselves about what we're telling you on the home front that's going on.
And a lot of it's knee-jerk reaction based on emotion. I mean, when you have
Sure
a
it is.
grieved mother who's sitting there that lost her daughter and this, I mean, you have to be very understanding, very respectful, but then again, never lose sight of the big picture of that was extremely unfortunate. It should have never happened, but there's no way to alleviate that one possibility without
Correct.
the negative consequence of everything else.
Exactly.
Okay.
Chairman, one more thing.
Yes, sir.
We hit on that. I think another reason, Danny, that this meeting is so great like this is because a lot of times we get in these meetings and us sheriffs, we hammer on the jail, okay, and those problems. And a lot of times the public and even some of our officials don't realize the impact. I know you guys do. That the jail, any type of issues, it trickles down to the cities, also the elected constables as well. And back to that in Austin, just like the sheriff Hawthorne's doing a great job. We as sheriffs, I know a lot of times, sheriff needs to reach out to me and Mark and let us, because we get neglect. We at times we get so enamored with our county and what's going on, we forget that we need to be there in Austin supporting him in the ways that he's supporting us, but at the same time, the police chiefs, the constables,
Yes.
we need to make sure we're banded together on this because it affects everybody in this room, to include our citizens.
Just to let y'all know, that was Steve McCraw calling the DPS, so maybe I need to go ask him about that trooper being on. Hey, let's go ahead and wrap this up.
Get into that.
Yeah, okay. Thank y'all so much, and I know in Southeast Texas, 99.9, what about the 0.1? Those are the ones you rounded up. Okay, but 99.9 of the folks, they love you, they value you. When those I don't just hear it from you when those troopers aren't out there. I'm hearing it from the women in the church on Sundays. They want to know where their black and whites are. Where are they, Rep? So we're going to work on that. For real, you just called me, okay? And so on behalf of Representative Bells and I, we want to thank you on behalf of our districts because we know where our districts are. They're on your side, and we're going to stay on the side of our folks. God bless you, and God bless everyone that tuned in, and thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.